Welcome to this presentation. It's not really yet the time, but since I'm starting with an anecdote that I heard on TED Talk, so I thought that I might as well start right now because I'm not really, like missing something. So, you know that the big companies actually test all their products, and they usually really want to know what is most popular and what is really attractive so that they can produce more of that and then sell more of that. So business actually went sort of, into personalization long time ago, before the education system. But I wanted to talk about the particular example. Do you know what pie is actually the most favorite pie? Of course, in America, because we don't really eat pies that much, we prefer cakes. It is the apple pie. And how do we know it? Because when the companies were actually producing the big, frozen pies, that's the pie that was sold most, by far. But then, something strange happened. Because for different reasons, the companies decided to try and produce smaller pies. And all of a sudden, the apple pie was not the most favorite pie. Actually, it became the fourth or even the fifth choice of many people. Why? Because when we had an option of buying a big pie, the decision had to be made based on a compromise. Because it had to serve the purpose of the entire family. So even though the apple pie wasn't my favorite pie, it was my second choice or maybe third, I would still go for it because at least, my mom liked it, my dad liked it, or my brother or my sister, so we would eat it. When the company started to produce smaller pies, then it turned out that actually people have a lot of different tastes, and they actually prefer different pies in different seasons. Is that personalization? Well, to a certain extent. But I will go much, much deeper into that. So please bear with me. I hope this 30 minutes will be engaging enough for you to get some piece of that with you home. I don't know if you noticed, but I actually changed the title. Now it says learning process. So it's the technology in the personalization, not of a teaching process, but learning. I did it on purpose because actually, you can perceive the subject, personalization of teaching process, as incorrect. Why is it incorrect? Because personalization, when you think about the word, its roots comes from personal, from a person. Can anybody else but me know what's personal for me? Can something be done without me? Can something be tailored for my needs without my input? Well, if we talk about tailoring, let me show you something. This is the t-shirt that I was supposed to wear today. It's a really nice t-shirt, and I really like it. And it's a team t-shirt. So you can actually see people around wearing them, and you can ask them for anything, after or even during the presentation. So when I'm a part of the team, and I'm standing there with them, I love and I want this t-shirt. But when I'm here on the stage, with no particular connection and nobody really knows, then I'm thinking my body shape, I'm thinking my attractiveness, I'm thinking all different sorts of things. And I decide not to wear it. So can actually anybody tailor my suit, without my input, without knowing what I like? It would depict definitely my body shape, but not the rest. Is it important for education system? Is tailoring of the uniforms important? Well, I think that actually uniforms probably serve some purpose at schools because naked bellies and, long V-necks are probably distracting. So that's not the part that I want to focus, talking about personalization. But personalization is definitely a huge subject. You can jump into it, into a deep water, or you can just pick and choose. You can decide that you want to focus on certain part of what I'm going to talk about. The personalization is all around. As I mentioned, TED Talks, I love them. I always look into inspiration. Look what's going on here. The TED Talks prize winners talk about supporting, talk about tapping into the innate sense of the children, talk about participation and engagement in the creation, talk about empowering. This subject is extremely important everywhere, not just in education. But since the education is in the base of our lives, we really need to start paying attention to it. And I do hope that our tools will actually allow you to take your own digital piece of cake, and that the personalization will be a piece of cake with those tools. Yesterday, my friend had a talk here, a presentation about neuroscience. And I will give you a moment to read this. Because what happens is that neuroscience is right now showing us that our patterns, that our ways of dealing with our children or at schools or outside of them are actually very often misleading. And that was my path towards personalization. Those are my two kids, and believe me, it wasn't easy to get such a photo because they usually pick at each other, not are in, perfect harmony. But what I'm getting here is that I only have two boys. Yet, when I learned very hard way how to become a good parent, and I learned certain approaches to my older child, it all of a sudden turned out that with my younger one, it didn't work. Well, if it just didn't work, maybe I wouldn't fret about it so much. But it actually worked the opposite. And I'm pretty sure that at least some of you have the same examples because a lot of my friends have it. And so those are just two kids. So how come that later on they are put into the classroom and the same approach is supposed to work with them? Something is just intuitively was wrong for me. That's why when they were the older one was about 5, I decided to jump really deep into psychology, sociology, neuroscience, and pedagogy. And so that's why I'm here today. Because we know so much about the brain. We decide, whether we have hemispheric dominance, left versus right, or frontal lobes versus sensory lobes, or maybe top-bottom or down, lower top brain and lower brain is working. Whichever is actually more at stake, whichever is the dominant. And then look at the communication, for example. How often do we try to explain something at work or at home for that matter, and then we sort of hit a wall because the other person does not understand our communication, our transfer of information. So then all of a sudden when they go to school, they are supposed to understand it. That's actually a vision from the beginning of the century of the education in 2000. And at first, glance, you can think, oh, come on, that's not what we have. Well, I'm sorry to say, but from neuroscience perspective, that's exactly what we have. Not everywhere, please don't get me wrong. There are plenty of schools that do it fantastically. But in majority, we are feeding the kids information. And they are seated for a predicted time that they cannot move, and they are fed, and all of a sudden they are supposed to be independent and creative. While we already know that the kids need to be active, they need to move around, they need to do things on their own, they need to try, touch, see, verify, make connections. That's when the learning actually really comes. So what is personalization about? Well, I would say, in shortest term, I will show you some definitions later, but it's really person-centered approach. It's something that just concentrates on a person. Is it doable, when we have so many people? Well, it is a huge shift in thinking. And definitely, without that shift, it will be impossible. Because think about it. It's the understanding that's at the base of the concept of personalization. Otherwise, if we don't understand how the brain works, how the children actually learn, then we won't be able to tailor that information or that approach towards them. It's a shift in the role of a teacher. It's a shift in the role of a student. It's a shift in the communication. It's the shift in the perception, materials, tools, everything. We often teach subjects, not students. And that's the sad reality of our schools and our approach. We think that this approach is a luxury. Sometimes we think it's insanity because we do pay attention to the social aspect of the schools. So one-to-one is not really a solution that we desire. But is it really such a luxury? You know, the schools have not always looked like this. And even in the beginning of 19th century, there were approaches that were based on doing, on motivation, and on tailoring the course. But does it have to look like this? It is in a way, we don't even know that this type of school is a compromise between the needs of the state, the church, well, the government, the military. We don't always dig that deep into the history of it. The beginnings of education were different, were more personal. You know, that's Socrates. Maybe not everybody, of you knows it, so maybe then this information will sort of fall on a dead ground, because if you don't know anything about him, then you don't really understand. But he conversed with his pupils. He talked. He made the conversations personal. Sometimes he made them too personal for my liking. That's Alcibiades, actually, one of his stipends. But even later on, when those people that actually could afford education, were going towards personal. Is this, again, the question is that a desirable goal? Because I would like to point out that even though I'm now complaining, because that's my job here about the schools, because I want to change something, we need to remember one thing. We achieved a lot. Because this is mass education. We actually managed to teach a lot of children, not just the chosen ones. Well, of course, some countries are still not there yet. But still, with technology, I think they will be there very, very soon. So we need to think about that achievement and ask ourselves a different question. Is it possible to actually personalize the learning or individualize the teaching when there are 30 kids in the classroom? Sometimes I love those photos, the screen looks empty, But is it actually possible? And I think that without technology, it's actually not. But let me ask you a question. Can we afford not to personalize? So I will make it will be a very short experiment because lack of time. But imagine I put these definitions. That's the only slide really with so much writing. I could put it on the board, blackboard, or even interactive board, or in a book, or whatever, because I want to talk about it. And so then I give you 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, to read this all. We don't have the whole day, so, 45 minutes lesson, curriculum to cover, not much time. So I give you 5 minutes at most, you need to read it, and then I build my information transfer on the base of that. Well, how can I do that if I am absolutely sure from neuroscience perspective, if just that you have not gathered all that? That some of you maybe understood the first definition, maybe some of you the third, maybe some of you got the parts of each of one, but not really. But before you digest the information, digest the new definitions, you cannot elaborate on them. You cannot actually build your own knowledge based on that. So my transfer of information will be lost for the majority of you, and I'm wasting time basically. So without building the basics and filling all the gaps, I can't do it. Why? Because personalization is based on motivation. It's based on active participation, engagement, of self-awareness. It has to come from within. How do we really achieve it? Well, if you look into Wikipedia, well, that's the definition, of course, differentiation, tailoring, but there is more. Wikipedia says, and Wikipedia says, then that's what it is, right? But it's technology that's used to personalize. A different, more broad, definition says that personalization actually involves using technology. Well, any technology, remember, books are technology as well. And we achieved a lot with the books. Now it is the time to move a little forward. Not dumping the books. That's not what I'm saying. But moving forward, adding more. Because technology needs to be used the right way. If it's not, then it's basically wasted approach as well. What do we need in order to personalize the information? What do we need when we have 30 children and then 2 or 3 or 4 classes? Well, we need to start from somewhere. How about understanding the kids? How about knowing what their needs are? When the teachers come to school, they usually
waste, well, that's not a good word really to use, but sort of waste 2 to 3 months to get to know the kids. That's the time that they could use already to personalize the information, because every single child is different. And so getting back to the question, it's not only about the needs, it's also about knowing the potential of each child. So you need to know the needs, but you need to know the potential on what to build. In order to get to know this potential, you need to be able to identify them quickly, but you need tools for that. There is no magic marker, you have to actually try to work. So you measure control, and that's with concentration and memory. You can measure flexibility, and that gives you some picture about the child's potential in creativity or solving the new problems, in adaptivity. You measure the processing. Well, measure is not actually the really good word that I'm trying to find here, but it's finding out, dynamically with each child, with the right tools. The processing, extremely important. Working memory is at the base of every learning. And actually, the recent scientist research shows that the geniuses differ from us not in the IQ, but in the capacity of using the working memory. That will give you a pretty detailed picture that you can use to actually personalize the approach towards every child. But you need to remember that the child stays in the center. Always the child stays in the center, and you need to understand the child. But then you need to be given a clear picture of what it is that your child actually has, the potential, the needs, the whatever differences. Because if you have to guess, then you won't be able to concentrate on the actual teaching process and on their learning process. So you need to be given clear information of what it is that you actually right now, just before, verified in a set of really complicated but pretty straightforward for the kids tests. Well, then maybe you want to think about the personalized seating, because the science shows that the seating arrangement is also very important in the classroom. But the sitting arrangement does not mean that one child can only sit with the other. But sometimes two kids cannot really sit together. Because think about it, if they cannot concentrate, both of them, for more than 20 seconds, then if they sit together, they reinforce that lack of concentration. So it's better to sit them a little differently. The application will give you suggestions. It will still allow you to do it because you are the deciding, factor here, but it will give you suggestions. Then you need materials. You actually need the content to pick and choose from. If you have it all in one place, then you can actually start tailoring it for the needs of the particular child, because you need to save time. If you are the teacher, then it is your role to use your personal time and the interaction with each student, not to look for materials, not to tailor them right then and there when you only have 45 minutes. And then you need to have verified approach, different channels that should be used. Because remember, there is this one thing about personalization. Many people may say, great, personalization, making, a pulp of information, making it really easy for the kids to digest. So no cognitive barriers. And cognitive barriers are good. You need to overcome certain barriers in order to learn. So it is not about making the pulp of the information. It's not to make it into a porridge, but it is to make it attractive and engaging, because the channel should be adjusted to the subject matter and should be adjusted to the information. Because when you show a map, can you talk about it without showing it? No, you have to show the map. That's at the base, at the core of that particular subject. But then you also need to engage the kids. Let them make certain projects. Let them actually feel that they are motivated. Let them see things. Sometimes maybe you don't have the laboratory at hand. Maybe you can't actually do it right then and there in the classroom. So what if you had it virtually? What if you could actually show them without putting a lot of effort and a lot of money into designing everything yourself? But for projects, then you may want to sit the kids differently. Again, you may need some recommendation for that, because the kids should not sit in the same layout every time. There is even more. When the kids get to choose sometimes how and where they sit, they get more engaged and more motivated. There is research for that too. We just don't know about it. Personalized avatars, those that sometimes the kids, really love to choose, and they want them to guide you. They want them to be with them, actually, because the teacher cannot always be there and cannot always come. So I have something that's personal. I chose it, it's mine, it stays with me. I can change it. And then the new avatar stays with me and is there. Then maybe I want to dress and make the avatar look different, so I actually really feel attached to that avatar. Maybe I want it different because it's Sunday and I'm studying at home. Or maybe it's Christmas, or maybe I'm into, sci-fi novels right now, so I want the avatar to look slightly different. Then the environment. Well, the environment, not only the one that's around us, is very important, but what is that we do when we buy a device or a computer? We charge it, we turn it on, and then we customize it. We want it to be ours. If I checked all those devices that you have right now, I am pretty sure each of you would have something different, because that's what we like. We like it to be personalized. So we want to put whatever we need at hand's reach. And then for the younger kids, we want to create worlds and stories and scenery that they will get engaged into, that they will believe into, and that they will want to follow and get back to, because that's really important. But maybe just in the regular tasks, maybe I want to read it in a different way. Maybe I am actually not a visual, thinker, so I want it really simplified. Or maybe I like black because I'm into Gothic, whatever. Or maybe I just really like it, scrambled like this because, I'm just a girl or not, and I like it this way. It should be possible to adjust. But that's not all. Maybe I learn quickly in math, but maybe I'm a longer thinker when it comes to languages. I should be allowed an individualized learning path. I should be allowed to go my own way, and the system should know where I should jump next based on the algorithm, because those are much more convenient and they are faster than the teacher, because teacher is one for all the 30 kids. So we need to make their jobs easier. So when you have that in-depth knowledge of each of your child, you can actually start designing your classroom based on the actual learning process. But there is one more thing. We talk so much about the kids being or not being ready for schools. I think it is really the time to start talking about the schools not being ready for the kids. It is the time to start talking about what it is that the schools should start doing in order to become ready for the kids. Because it is all in the knowledge of how the learning process looks like, in the understanding of the concept, so that you can build the environment that's particular for your needs. There is no one solution. I cannot present to you that, this one solution will actually be good for your school, for your kids, or for whatever there is. But if you have the right tools in order to tailor it for your needs, then you have the real potential to create something individualized, or even boost the energy of the kids so that they make it personalized. Because building of the environment is really important. Nowadays, ladies and gentlemen, young people, learn as much at school as they learn outside of it. The real problem is how to connect those two worlds. Why don't they connect those two worlds? Again, research. The research shows that that the same parts of the brain that participate in digesting, in taking in the information, also participate in giving that information or the transformed information into knowledge. The same parts of the brain participate. So if you learned something by heart, don't expect to be creative with it. The brain will just regurgitate it, just as it took it in, by heart. It will not elaborate it, and it will not be able to do much with it. So once the kids stop being a mystery to us, once we truly understand their needs and their potential, I hope that with our tools, you will be able to design and give them their individual piece of pie or of cake. Thank you for your attention.